Hello, this is Angelica Yingst, and you're listening to Centered, grounded conversations about the metaphysical.
Blessed February, my little hedgehogs. It's Angelica, your astrological toe dipper and Earth Medicine mama, here with the Astrology, Tarot, and Earth Medicine for February. I mean, effin' February. And though she be but little, she is fierce. So February is only 28 days, but this month, this year, it's a potent 28 days. It's like espresso or cayenne, a little goes a long way. But this is a month. Quick disclaimer, okay, before we launch into the cosmos. I want you to know that I read a lot of astrologers to bring you this monthly reading because I myself am not a formally trained astrologer. I can't map the sky from scratch. And while I can't map the sky in the forecast, if you tell me something's happening, I can be like, man, that's something. And I can kind of try to break down that info for you. And that's what I try to do in these. But, I understand astrology, but I'm not an astrologer. So if you hear something and you're like, oh, where did she get that? I can probably tell you where I got that, because I read different astrologers. So hello, ADHD, my old friend. I am all over the place right now, but I'm going to focus. So I want you to know that because when I have been reading all the write-ups for February or for this year, they're honestly unhinged in the best way because they're, we're at the threshold of a new era and this is a once in a lifetime cycle reboot and the great pivoting movement is occurring in this larger cycle of time or whatever. I mean, is it hyperbole? Is it astrological insanity? Is this a cosmic marketing ploy? Well, I can say this, that when I'm looking at the astrology for February, something's shifting. It is a big deal. So February 2026 opens this new collective cycle. And we've been sort of talking about this over the past couple of years. So this shouldn't be a surprise necessarily, but you'll kind of feel it now. So this opens this new chapter of kind of spiritual evolution or I don't know, maybe that's the best way to say it. The astrology of the month is deeply shaped by Aquarius and Pisces. And those are the two sun signs that will be in February, every February. But these two transpersonal signs kind of speak in a way to the collective soul. And they're modern rulers of Uranus and Neptune. And then add Saturn stepping into Aries and the exact Saturn-Neptune conjunction at 0 degrees Aries later this month. And yeah, it's not very subtle. This is a pivot point. And I think cosmic reset's a good way to say it, or, we're kind of in a long-term chapter marker or bookmark in the story of humanity's becoming. So the big headline everyone's talking about is that Neptune is moving into Aries. We had our first taste of this in 2025, and now and I mean, this has already happened. It's January 26, 2026, Neptune moved into Aries. And this is settling in until 2039. So for some of us, that's it. This is what we're experiencing in our lifetime. So why does that matter? So Neptune is the planet of dreams, imagination, mysticism, and yes, sometimes confusion. Neptune moves slowly, so it takes about 165 years to travel the whole zodiac. So it doesn't describe your Tuesday mood so much as the psychic weather of an entire generation because it takes so long to move. So, and it isn't going to affect your daily per se. It's more of the feel, right? Neptune dissolves edges. It blurs lines. And it softens the boundaries between what's real, what's hoped for, what's projected, what's sold to us as reality. So Neptune rules the imaginative arts like film, music, photography, poetry, and it cares way more about the atmosphere and feeling than neat narratives and linear logic. So Neptune can open portals to devotion. It can open portals to awe. It can also lead us into like fantasy and denial and projection and beautifully wrapped misinformation. Does any of this sound familiar? Neptune's divisions are powerful, but they always ask us for discernment. So now the big shift. So Neptune is leaving the oceanic waters of Pisces and moving into the fire of Aries. And that's the energetic pivot. So Pisces is basically a chaotic, immutable water sign. So, and that's not bad, it's very dreamy, but it's basically saying this pivot's like the dream is no longer what we want to float inside of. It becomes something we move towards actively and perfectly bravely. But Neptune in Aries says don't dream it, chase it, initiate it, experiment, because Aries is a cardinal fire sign. It makes stuff happen. I mean, Aries isn't always like, let's figure it all out. It's like, let's just start and see what happens. So it's less of this passive drifting energy of just like, let's see what's happening now, and more of like a courageous becoming. And honestly, that's like a very particular kind of magic. Historically, the last time Neptune moved through Aries, which was 1861 to 1874, nothing happened in the US during that point, right, guys? So the world was in upheaval. This was like the Civil War and independence movement and abolition and radical artistic breakthroughs. It wasn't tidy. It wasn't comfortable. It was undeniably catalytic. And on a personal level, if you've been feeling stalled or foggy or like you can't find a perfect way to begin, Neptune in Aries offers this gentle but persistent nudge. It's just like, start anyway. Make the mistake. Take the small step. Take the tiniest match. Let it go. Start the fire. And this transit asks us to notice where we've checked out, disassociated, gone numb, spiritually bypassed our way around real life action. So, and this is a time to be tender with yourself. It's not like, oh, you're broken because you did this. You were surviving, and all of us were. Now we're waking up and seeing like, oh my gosh, this is where my dissociative tendencies have gotten me. So we're really looking at like manifesting, but what we want in the world. And we're not doing that by just like wishing it to be. We're doing it by showing up again and again, especially for that vision that won't leave us alone. You have something that's persistently there. It's like, it's asking for your devotion, right? And not like, I mean, I don't know where everybody is, but I am in a very cold Pennsylvania right now. This morning I woke up it says it's 3 degrees on my computer. It says it's 8 degrees on my porch. But the interesting thing about this is like our air system cannot keep up. So we have a wood burning stove and we have to burn fire all night, right? So if I wake up to pee in the middle of the night, which is normal because I'm in my 50s, I just add some logs to the fire. Now, if there's already a fire burning, it's very easy. I just throw the logs in, close the cover and that. But if it has burned all the way down to coals, I mean, the coals are there, they're orange, I have to stoke it. I have to be gentle. I have to start it small. And so I think it's really important to remember that these fires don't have to be like, they don't have to start as a bonfire. They can start as little coals, this burning thing that's been in you that maybe hasn't been stoked in a while. You can put little bits of, small sticks and kindling, and then build it up in a little tent, right? Like we do with a fire. So, that's the big thing. It's not a big thing, it just needs your starting. And Aries is perfect for this. So when we think about this era, it's what can I do right now with the life I have? It's not like, let's just wait and see what happens. Let's go with the flow. You see that a lot with Pisces, right? Because it's, it is a mutable, flexible water sign. So it goes into the small places. It allows itself to be taken. I mean, I'm not saying that water is passive, because if you've ever seen, Niagara Falls, water is not passive. I remember looking at Niagara Falls, like just the river before it gets there, and I'm just like, holy crap, you would never survive that, right? Like, I'm a decent swimmer. I could never survive that, It just is so powerful. And if you've seen like the ocean or been taken out in the ocean, it feels like nothing's happening. And then next thing you know, you're way too far out. And you have to trick it by, swimming horizontal. So I'm not saying water's passive, but we can get passive, especially when Neptune, which is already dreamy and watery and all that stuff, is in Pisces. It's just like, okay, just hang, babe. Like, just watch what's going on, and then you figure it out. So, all right, let's break down the rest of February astrologically. So February starts out with a powerful full moon in Leo on the 1st. So I am busy at work because the 1st is Imbolc, which is, on the pagan agrarian calendar, like the beginning of spring, which I know it isn't technically in our world, but it is kind of the stirring of the seeds. And so I'm doing some healing circles. And then we have the full moon on the 1st. And then we have the February, like just the whole reading. Like, I've got a lot of stuff going on, right? But we got this very powerful full moon in Leo on the 1st. And it's coupled with like this supercharged stellium with the Sun, Mercury, Venus, Mars, and Pluto all in Aquarius. So this is like revolutionary change from day one. And God, I love Aquarius revolutionary spirit. It mobilizes us. It can be really beautiful. And, I think like the best thing to remember is at this full moon in Leo, think heart over head, creative courage is important. So we're kind of like nurturing and expressing our unique essence. And, Leo is nothing but like believing in oneself. It is a fixed fire sign, meaning it is like the most fire of the fire. So it is, creative, charming, out there, extroverted, positive. It wants to stay positive. It also like fosters collective progress when we see this full moon in Leo. Like Leo, when the full moon is in Leo, the sun is in Aquarius. Okay? Leo loves the sun. And Aquarius, likes the moon. So we're thinking about, well, does it like the moon? I don't know if that's fair. Anyway, as the full moon in Leo peaks, we're having all this stellium in Aquarius. So this is just really Aquarian energy. So we're kind of moving our attention into this interplay between Saturn, the traditional ruler of Aquarius, and Uranus. Right? So it is just a really powerful time for revolution. And we've got a lot of that going on. We can see it in the like geopolitical stuff happening right now. Then on the 3rd, Uranus stations direct. And so we see some momentum there of, Uranus is in Taurus right now. And so there's kind of an urgency with like closing cycles and breaking free of like old, outdated patterns. So we're really kind of moving forward and being proactive with creating a life aligned. And then on the 6th, Mercury enters Pisces, which is all about intuition and symbolism and dreams, and discernment is important at this point. And then Venus enters Pisces. So we have a lot of these like changes of, and I mean, that's Mercury and Venus travel faster, right, than Neptune, Uranus, and Pluto, for example. So when they change, they're kind of big deals. So Saturn enters Aries on the 13th. And this is something that will stay, like Saturn's going to stay in Aries until 2028. So this is where we are challenged to kind of cultivate resilience and determination and really be in that Aryan, do you call it Aryan? That was not right. Aries mindset, which is developing like an intentional relationship with our strength and our courage and confronting our own insecurity. So we're really thinking about the rules, right? Because that's what Saturn asks us to do from an Aries point of view. And so it asks us to like maturely relate with conflict and our anger and to restructure things. It's very masculine energy, like regardless of our gender, it's masculine energy. And so we have to work with our Saturn being in Aries, right? Or Saturn being in Aries. And then you think about like, where is your Saturn, and how does that interrelate? Now, another big thing this month is on the 17th, we have a new moon and a solar eclipse. So this begins eclipse season. So we've got initiation. And, eclipses are very interesting. They are one of those things that people are like, oh, an eclipse, they really initiate change. And they initiate like us working with shadow stuff around this. And already the new moon is shadowy, so any solar eclipse is going to be like the light is eclipsed, So we're kind of thinking about all of that. Now, one of the things I find incredibly fascinating is how cultures and spiritual traditions around the world don't actually orient to time the way the modern calendar does. So many lineages actually track lunar cycles as their, and the seasonal rhythms as like their calendar. So we see this in the Chinese and East Asian traditions, in Judaism and in Islam and Buddhism and Confucian calendars, even in Christianity, which ironically helps shape the Gregorian calendar, but it anchors some of its sacred seasons to the Jewish lunar calendar through the timing of like Passover and Easter and things like that. So in 2026, there's this striking convergence of these rhythms right around the 17th and 18th of February. So February 17th brings the new moon, like I said, and then the beginning of the Chinese Lunar New Year, which is ushering us into the year of the fire horse. And that alone is a powerful threshold. And at the same time, then, we have Christian traditions observing Shrove Tuesday or Mardi Gras or whatever you want to call it, the final feast day before the beginning of Lent. And then on the 18th is Ash Wednesday, and that marks the beginning of the Lenten season for fasting, reflection, spiritual realignment. And that's, an interesting time. And then layered right on top of that is Ramadan. So in the Islamic tradition, Ramadan is like the biggest month of the year. It's also expected to begin, this sacred month of fasting, prayer, and devotion. That sounds exactly like Lent, right? But it is a really important time. So Muslims that can, obviously if you're sick or ailing and you need to eat, there's no expectation of this, but from sun up to sun down, there's no eating or drinking of water. So then when sun goes down, you break the fast with a date and you eat in the evening. So there's often like a breaking of the fast in the evening that happens. So Ramadan, because it's a lunar cycle, it changes every year where it happens. So in February, when you have shorter days, that's fine. But like in summer, when you have these long days and it's incredibly hot, Ramadan is a really hard thing to keep. And if you're like, for example, my daughter has some friends who hold fast at school, and it's difficult when everybody's eating around you. But that's why it's a spiritual tradition. In Lent, you're supposed to be fasting as well. It's different. We have days that we fast and blah, blah, blah. But anyway, these 2 days, the 17th and 18th, aren't just like astrologically significant because of the new moon. They're globally significant. So I think like when I see all these cultures celebrating the same time as important, I think, let's pay attention to that. So across multiple religions, cultures, and spiritual lineages, this is a moment in time that's recognized as a threshold, both a beginning and an ending and a recalibration. And that tells me something's important here. Now, I said, it's, Chinese Lunar New Year. It's also Losar, and it just is like, so it's just everything. So those are important. So we're crossing into the year of the fire horse. We're standing on a new moon. We're entering eclipse season. We're brushing up against massive Aries activations, and all of it speaks to initiations, forward motion, being asked in a real and embodied way to participate in your own becoming. So that seems important. Now, the year of the fire horse in Chinese astrology is something I talked about at the year reading that I did in the beginning of January. So you can go back and listen to some of that. But fire horse, the way I read fire horse is really carrying the medicine of horse. And the medicine of the South, which is, to me, fire. So it carries medicine of courage, sovereignty, and embodied momentum. We think of horse as being, the great sojourner, the one that runs, and is free. And it's ironic because we have, domesticated horses, but their representative in shamanic worlds is freedom. So this isn't a quiet, contemplative new year. It is a year that asks us to move with intention, to trust our instincts, and to begin even before we feel fully ready. And then we place this alongside this Aries activation. And my goodness, the future isn't something we're going to wait for. It's something we're going to participate in. So again, I speak more about the deeper mythic and astrological themes of the year in my 2026 yearly reading podcast. So I'll try to link that in the notes. But the astrology of this month is really inviting us to stay in a braver relationship with our own becoming. This isn't about perfection, it's about participation. And so just then a few hours after the eclipse, then we're going into the sun moving into Pisces, the last sign of the zodiac. And it just guides us into a space where time doesn't exist, boundaries aren't a thing, and everything is possible. Pisces season really is an invitation to explore how to be active participants in the flow of life while trusting, divine intelligence and timing. So this time of year is all about closure, transition, transcendence. The sun in Pisces is an invitation to be creative, and to be in our intuition, to be in our dream life. This is a perfect time to do dream work if you don't already do that work. So, and then the last thing really of this month, I could do something every day, but the last thing of this month is that Mercury stations retrograde in Pisces. And what does that mean? It just means we have to slow down, review, recalibrate, use our intuition, all this stuff for Mercury retrograde that we always say. It's okay, don't sign any contracts, just be careful what you're saying, because communication is shadowed, right? It's moving backwards. It's really supposed to be internal. So we also have to discern our internal voice and ask ourselves, am I being fair here? Am I being true? Am I being, self-serving? So we're asked to kind of embrace a more heart-centered way of showing up in our communications, and to really be discerning on the thoughts we dwell on, the words we speak, those kind of things. So you kind of see the second half of February, just the tempo of life quickens and things shift and unfold and things move quite quickly. So, the weeks that kind of follow, we're going to witness some big events and turning points that shape a larger arc of history, I think. And just as importantly, we're going to feel that internally as Aries energy gathers strength. We're being asked to take a deeper look and a deeper level of responsibility for who we are and how we move through the world. This isn't about reacting from old scripts and old wounds and inherited information. It's about acting from inner alignment and integrity and conscious choice. So we're asked to look at outdated systems, identities, and illusions. So, I've been talking about the astrology of February, and if you don't subscribe to Chani Nicholas, please do that. She really puts things in perspective of the current geopolitical landscape and historical landscape as it matches up with the astrology. Something that like I always learn something from. So I want you to know that we're also like Pluto is also in Aquarius, and it's going to be in Aquarius for a long time. This is what she says. This is a quote. Okay, I'm reading from what she said. The Pluto return of the Haitian, French, American, and industrial revolutions is happening. We're living through Neptune and Aries and Uranus and Gemini, and both the Neptune and Uranus returns of the American Civil War. Add that to the Uranus return of World War II and the creation of NATO. We're also headed for a once in 26-ish year conjunction of Saturn and Neptune in Aries this February. The last time Saturn and Neptune made a conjunction in Capricorn was the fall of the Berlin Wall, which led to the collapse of the Soviet Union. We could say the overlaps are eerily similar. Just like you and me, every country, revolution, and major event in history has an astrology chart. And when those charts experience a planetary return, when a planet circles back to the exact location it was in of a slow-moving planet like Uranus, Neptune, or Pluto, we know that we're in a moment that mirrors, rhymes with, or repeats the major themes of the last time that planet was there. When we are in a time where all of the slow-moving planets are changing signs at once, all referencing past periods when the world reshaped itself, we know we are in it. These transits that we're in, these planetary signatures, take substantial swaths of time to play out. All told, the shortest one lasts around 3 years, Saturn conjunct Neptune, while the others last 7 years, Uranus and Gemini, 14 years, Neptune and Aries, and close to 20 years, Pluto and Aquarius. So we know these shifts will span more than one election cycle, and we've only been in this transit for about a year. A year. What happened last year in January? Okay. You guys know, right? I don't have to say it. So anyway, I will link her piece in my show notes so you can read them yourself. Hi, friends. I'm just interrupting our regularly scheduled podcast for a little promo. If you like my readings, I have a membership group in which I do readings at the full moon and the new moon. And at those readings, I do a full tarot reading and interpret that for you. And I give a tarot layout for you to use, journal questions and prompts, information about the full moon. And I do that throughout the month at different things. You get full in-depth write-ups about all of this medicine. And I talk about the Wheel of the Year a lot. And so as the wheel turns towards Imbolc and we're moving into the beginning of February, we're leaning into, fire and tension and small acts of devotion that make life feel a little more inhabitable. And so we kind of are beginning to see the light come back. So I've created a number of offerings that I'm going to be doing in February and March. Some are online, some are in person. You can always find them at themoonandstone.com/event. And I have 2 Imbolc circles. One's in person in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania at the Moon and Stone Studio, which is at the lower level of AltaView. That's on February 1st from 3 p.m. to 5 p.m. Then online, I'm doing a healing circle on February 2nd, and that'll be from 12 to 2 p.m. There is a learning how to make fire cider with Erica Jo Schaefer. She is an amazing herbalist, and she's just like altogether witchy and cool and shamanic. She'll be at the Moon and Stone Studio on February 28th. On February 21st, the AltaView Wellness Center is having an open house with different readers. So you can go in there and get a mini reading. All services are 25 minutes and it's $50 per reading. So if you want to try a reader and you don't want to pay for a full session, this is a great way to do that. John Tucker's going to be there. Dawn Toole's going to be there. She's an animal intuitive. She did readings with Louie and Charlie, and they were amazing. Michelle Kilgore does Reiki. Liz Ann's going to do tarot and palmistry. She's amazing too. Linda Toki's doing tarot and oracle reading. Kim Kreiner's doing tarot and oracle. John Ford's doing tarot. Mike Kilgore is doing intuitive guidance. They're all just great readers. And then again on the 28th, we're going to have Erica Jo Schaefer coming to teach you how to make your own fire cider. And then on March 7th, I am doing a creative workshop, which is create your own portable altar or shrine, because I love those. So just check out my stuff and support my work because I love doing it. So let's move into the Earth Medicine and Tarot of February. Now, these I choose like in 2025 before I know what's happening in the world. I just choose them. And for February, I pulled the moon card. So the moon is and it's interesting that we have an eclipse this month and we start off in a full moon. So it is very moony, and I think it will continue to feel moony the whole month. So the moon is the 18th card of the major arcana, and she carries with her all the mystery and emotion of the actual moon in the sky and all the ancient lore surrounding her too. So if the sun represents clarity in the tarot, the moon represents shadows and mysteries. And by shadows, I mean the Jungian concept of shadow self and shadow work. And a lot of people talk about shadow, like, oh, I have a shadow work notebook, and I have this, and I have that. A lot of times, like, shadow just arises. It's like we don't have to sit down and, like, be like, I got to look at my shadow now. Shadow will show up, and you do the work when it shows up, rather than us thinking like, oh, I have to go in and do the shadow. So John Elder, writing on Jung's theory of the shadow, describes it this way, and I think this is helpful. The shadow describes the part of the psyche that an individual would rather not acknowledge. It contains the denied parts of the self. Since the self contains these aspects, they surface in one way or another. Bringing shadow material into consciousness drains its dark power and can even recover valuable resources from it. The greatest power, however, comes from having accepted your own shadow parts and integrated them as components of yourself. Does that make sense? So in tarot, the moon has come to represent the entire notion of the shadow self and the parts of us we try to hide. Not in a judgmental or accusatory way, just the moon challenges us to look at what we've been hiding. Bring it forward, make friends with it, as John Elder says, to drain it of its dark power. So the moon gets us to get honest with ourselves. It asks us to get honest with ourselves, to find our true motivations, to experience acceptance of all of who we are. So when I read tarot, I see like thousands of meanings in each card. And then my gift as an intuitive, or this is what I teach my tarot students, and a seasoned reader, is discerning which meaning is alive in the reading, right? So it's like, okay, I have all these things. Like, I'm not going to be an encyclopedia and just tell you what every single thing means. That's why in these bigger readings, I do tell you what everything means, because when we're working with a card for an entire month, we're going to see the good, the bad, the ugly of the card, right? So the moon is far more a call to like pay attention to our triggers, to what's coming up for us, that what feels like dark and gritty and shame ridden, and look at it. And though I believe it's like a really important aspect of the card, it also there's other meanings of the moon. The moon can call for dream work, for nighttime work, for astral journeying, shamanic journey. It can call for, intuitive work, psychic work. It can ask us to pay attention to our own cycles, like the moon cycles. For women, this is a card of paying attention to our menstrual cycles, right? And if we're in, the crone stage like I am, then we're paying attention to just our regular cycles of mood, up and down and all of that. She is a symbol, the moon, of the divine feminine and that goddess energy. In the traditional imagery of the moon, two pillars stand in the background. These pillars are said to represent the conscious and unconscious mind. So when we walk between them, which every path kind of leads to walk between them, you see it in the death card, you see it in the moon. But when we walk through that, we're like moving into the next dimension of consciousness and understanding. We call that non-ordinary reality in shamanic work, but that liminal space that we enter in dreamland, in journeying, and meditation, and trance. So it kind of, it harkens back to the shadow self. So when we walk between the pillars, We begin seeing ourselves as Great Spirit sees us, divine beings, perfect children of God, light beings. We cease judging shadow and we begin asking for understanding. Why did we respond that way? Where does that trigger come from? How do I stop the trigger from having me act out? Right? Like, triggers are normal human responses to trauma. My teacher, Pixie Lighthorse, she kind of described it in a way that was like, okay, when we have the trigger, it's like our brain is like, oh, I've seen this before and I know how to react. The problem is that the part that takes over is the age that trauma happened, right? So, if you were made fun of at age 6 and you go, okay, I feel like I'm being made fun of here, which you may or may not, it doesn't matter. It's just your brain's kind of recognizing the pattern. And sometimes those pattern recognitions go haywire from trauma, okay? Or from whatever, neglect, from all kinds of things. Traumas with little t's as well. Okay, so then our 6-year-old's taking over and saying, like, I know how to fight this fight. So what does a 6-year-old do? It might cry. It might, the 6-year-old might whine. They might hit you, right? Just throw fists. They might throw themselves on the floor, depending on the maturity level of the 6-year-old. Now, a lot of us who've had trauma at that age didn't develop, so we will have different kinds of responses, right? So what we're trying to do is recognize, the 6-year-old, when the 6-year-old's like, I'm ready to take over. I know how to fight this. Our wiser self, because once the 6-year-old's driving the bus, we cannot access our wisdom. We cannot access our 52-year-old wisdom, speaking from this 52-year-old. So the 6-year-old's now in charge. And that's how you burn bridges, right? So what we want to do is recognize that the 6-year-old's trying to take charge, or the 3-year-old, or the 18-year-old, or the 12-year-old, or whatever, however age. And we want to take charge, or the unhealed self. Think of it. You can be an adult and have an unhealed, angry part of yourself take over, right? But I would maybe postulate that there's another event that might have, at any rate, I don't want to get too far in the weeds here, but basically, the trigger is there as a good thing, right? It's basically saying, I remember this. Something's happening in our brain. We want to protect ourselves. We feel vulnerable. We feel scared, right? So the trigger is basically saying, I'm about to take over here. And so, our adult self, our wise, healed self says, no. I've also seen this before. I know how to deal with it. You can relax. Mama's got you, right? The idea is the parent, the adult in the room can take over. Not your unhealed 6-year-old wounded self, the one that's going to throw fists, but the adult parent who doesn't lose their shit when they get triggered, right? As parents, our kids are at some point going to say, you're mean, I don't like you, whatever, But we get to be like, that's fine. I love you no matter what. You don't have to like me, right? And then we are the ones who are keeping the order, right? We're the ones who are setting those boundaries of just yes, but you're still not getting away with I am not here to be liked by you. I'm here to guide you into being a decent human adult, right? So that's the same thing that happens in our triggered self. The adult takes over. And so when we have clarity and acceptance and understanding of that child, we go, oh, yeah, right. You're not a bad person. You're not an evil person. You're a hurt person. You're an afraid person. You're an afraid 6-year-old, right? You're not a wise 52-year-old. So that journey, like, is often mired in fear of the unknown, but it's all within us. I say this all the time to my sponsees when they're about to do their 4th step, which is when we take inventory of all the harms we committed in our lives. I always say, like, this isn't new. This is just the stuff that you ruminate on that's already within you. Like, you just get to write that down. You just get to put a name to it. You get to call it by its proper name, as D.H. Lawrence says, right? Like, we need to call things by their proper name, because otherwise what we're calling it is like conspiracy theories. We're like paranoid. We think everyone's out to get us. We're not seeing that, like, it's our boundary to keep, right? So sometimes it feels really dangerous to enter those subconscious realms because we think, oh, I'm going into this unknown place. No, this is you. Like, it's a form of self-deception to be afraid of the you. To be afraid of knowing ourselves. Like, we should we fear meeting what is not serving us? No, that's the part that we want to know. We want to know what's not working. We want to know how to release it. We want to know and acknowledge that we're playing out the same pattern so that we can truly be our best self and surround ourselves with people who are going to build us up and not down. So stripped down in its meaning, the moon is an incredibly psychic, intuitive, and healing card. It's deep and emotional, ancient and primal, and it speaks to that higher self place. But, it's also like the know thyself card. So if, that's a fear of yours, we're kind of looking at, like, why are you afraid of this childhood part of you? Why are you afraid of the child of you? Because they were hurt, right? Because they were so wounded. But now we get to be the parent that we needed. And I say we in the royal we, like, I don't really feel that way about my parents necessarily, but I do think we all have these unhealed parts because we have a child's way of looking at things. And the problem is when we remember things, we tend to put our adult self into our child body, right? So we forget that we were, naive, that we trusted humans, adults, to have our best interest at hand. They don't always do that, right? Not all adults are watching out for us. There are adults that prey on children, right? So we do get that part. At any rate, okay, I've gone off the deep end. So the 3 animals in the moon card are a wolf, which is howling at the moon, a dog, which is just kind of sitting there, and then a lobster crawling up from the depths. All of these are scavengers. I just want you to know. The wolf, I believe, represents the untamed part of ourselves, the wild part, the one that's feral, the one that knows what it needs at all times. The dog represents the part that has gotten basically beaten into submission. The wolf part is still in the dog, but the dog can sit still and whatever. And depending on your point of view, right, maybe you're lawful good and you're like, that dog is the best part of this whole card. And then there's the wild, chaotic parts of us that are like, that wolf, that's the best part of that card, right? Then the lobsters coming up from the depths of the ocean floor. Now, lobsters are scavengers, they're transmuters, but they have this like brilliant color, and they're coming out of the darkness of the bottom, the ocean floor, into the light. I mean, it's the light of the moon, right? But it's called by that. It's called by the light of the moon. The moon is saying, see, it looks dark out here, but I will illuminate what you need to see. And then move you into the sun, because the 19 card is the sun. So being at the moon may be that part of ourselves, the one that is called to inherently worship the moon, right? And the sun and the earth and the cycles. So maybe it's about also calling our fellow shadow walkers to us and forming packs so we feel understood. How many of us have hung out with people that aren't doing their work? And it is like hard, right? It's so hard, man. Because they're not willing to talk about or look at any part of themselves that isn't perfection. Chef's kiss. So, in the end, the moon cautions that not all is as it seems, but her caution's not sinister. It's basically like, you already know this, the moon's sort of whispering. Where are you self-deceiving with yourself, the self obviously, but where are you deceiving with a lover, a friend, a situation? Where are you pushing out of fear or out of will or out of ego-based ends? The moon is not a pushy, sneaky bastard. She's a mentor and a teacher, and she's preparing you. So ultimately, the moon is like almost like a mirror, and it's casting shadows because it is like the light is different than the sun, right? In the daytime, yes, there are shadows, but most of the time you can see everything, right? The moon, the shadows are like the deepest black. And so if you see a shadow in the moonlight, you could think that's a bear, or it could just be, a shadow from a tree. And that's where we get to look at our projections, and, it is a very much a mirror for us. So, but ultimately, think of it as a card of ascension and spiritual growth. It's just asking you to do the work of looking at what has been hidden. Towards, we're looking at that end being towards spiritual growth and maturity and readiness for ascension. We're moving towards the world card. So we're being asked to prepare for enlightenment and holiness. And self-awareness is the key, not just to enlightenment, but to psychic ability and intuition and all of those things. So you're just being asked to clear out the inner debris that makes you doubt, question, or feel deserving of God's grace or your higher power or ascension. And make no mistake that this card follows the star. So we're in that optimistic space. Now we just have to look at the stuff holding us back. So I wrote an affirmation on there, and it's kind of a poem, maybe. I should have made it like a haiku, but I did not. Anyway, the moon teaches me to rise above my darkest instincts, gently illuminating my shadow, so I become curious about the mystery of me. Is that a poem? Nah, it's just an affirmation. All right, let's look at the Earth Medicine for the month. So, I picked the Earth Medicine based on the card, and I picked Moonflower. And, I love Moonflower. We had a bunch growing at Altaview Wellness Center, and then Sharon Muzio, who is my bestie, she harvested a bunch of the seeds and handed them out to people, and they're kind of magical because they're also nocturnal, so they bloom at night. But, I'm just warning you, they can be a bit evasive. And honestly, sometimes it's really the magic you need in your gardens. Like you have this whole area that won't grow, and these are very hardy plants. But so moonflowers thrive in really well-drained soil. They require full sun during the day. That's the interesting part of their medicine. Even though they bloom at night, they really need sunlight to fuel their growth. They love to climb, so trellises, fences, anything vertical, showcasing their vines and large blossoms. And many of the moonflowers produce fragrant trumpet-shaped flowers ranging from white to pale yellow to soft peach, and there's also purple, and there's different colors. The flowering period runs generally through summer and into fall, and then they produce these thorny seed pods, hence the name thornapple, which sometimes they go by. But depending on the species, the plants grow as bushy shrubs or small trees. The leaves are pale, and they're beautiful. I chose Moonflower intuitively, so I didn't really look at the medicine for it. I haven't used it too much in my work, and now I know why. So, I really do choose these cards by random, and then the medicine arrives with them. The wolf appeared on the card of the moon, so I chose wolf, but Moonflower kind of came through because I never really researched it. I love it at Altaview, and I just felt like it was a perfect ally for shadow and night blooming work because they bloom in shadow. And they open when most things are asleep, and so that felt right. And also I'm intuitive. I don't really need a reason, but anyway, all it being said, I did not know that Moonflower, especially those of the Datura family, are highly poisonous. So I am just giving you this disclaimer. Never ingest, never experiment. This is not medical advice, not a recipe, not an invitation to try anything. This is plant lore, shared with respect and caution. So plants such as Datura do not operate with human morality. right? They're powerful beings with their own intelligence. They're not here to keep us safe. They're here to be what they are, and they happen to be incredibly poisonous. So moonflower, or Datura, is sometimes called gypsum weed or devil's trumpet or hell's bells. It's a nocturnal beauty, renowned for ethereal blossoms that unfurl under moonlight. She is a highly toxic plant in the nightshade family and has long been revered by witches and indigenous cultures for spiritual, medicinal, and magical purposes. Historically, Datura appears in folklore and occult traditions as a plant associated with trance, liminality, and spirit contact, and that's because of its toxicity and unpredictability. And I'm keeping this firmly in the realm of history, symbolism, and myth, and not in modern practice. But one of the common names for Datura is gypsum weed, which is derived from Jamestown weed. So in 1676, British soldiers stationed at Jamestown reportedly ate Datura greens and experienced 11 days of delirium. I mean, they were like tripping their balls off. I shouldn't even say tripping, because it's not exactly a hallucinogenic. It's a delirium producer. So it makes you afraid, very afraid. So some accounts suggest the soldiers mistook the plant for edible greens, and others suggest they were intentionally poisoned by antagonistic colonists, which is interesting too. But herbalist Leonora Curtin wrote extensively about Datura and healing herbs of the upper Rio Grande. And she describes how Hernan Cortez entered Aztec gardens. And so he and his followers were kind of astonished by the beauty and variety of plants used to treat pain, and Datura was used that way. The Aztec name Tolatzin was shortened to Tolach, which refers to several species of Datura. Curtin also shares the Zuni legend how long ago, while dwelling in the underworld, a boy and a girl found a path to the world of light and decorated their heads with garlands of Datura blossoms. And the plants, like when they were put upon them, was like bestowed the power to make people sleep and see ghosts. So when the children told the twin sons of the Sun Father, the divine ones became alarmed and removed the children from the earth. And so Datura blossoms now grow where they vanished, which I like. So Curtin noted that among the Zuni, Datura has been associated with inducing sleep and seeing spirits, particularly in ceremonial contexts, related to like calling in the rain. And many species commonly referred to as moonflower. So some of them are members of the morning glory family, the Ipoema alba, and others are the Datura genus. So we have gypsum weed, which is Datura stramonium. Datura noxia is moonflower. Datura metal is the white and purple blossoms. And Datura Righty is the sacred Datura. So they contain tropane alkaloids, including atropine, scopolamine, which I had to take during one of my things, surgeries, and hiscopamine. They're compounds that affect the nervous system and can cause hallucinations, delirium, and coma. So they're the same compounds used and isolated in modern medicine, but that does not mean that it's safe for casual or home use. Datura is a sacred plant and should be treated as such, and if you're not trained in it, I wouldn't use it. But it was used traditionally, and I don't know why I hid this, because I really had it in the beginning, and then somehow I edited it down. Edited. I need to edit that out. But anyway, it was used traditionally as a flying ointment. That's what they call it when they're going into a, liminal space of astral journeying. And it really was supposed to encourage people to come out of the broom closet. There's this famous witch named Sarah Lawless who kind of brought that popularity out. And she shared her work with poisonous plants. Again, this isn't an invitation, okay? I would not tried to make a flying ointment, unless you know what the hell you're doing. I do not, so I would not do that. But it has like a very intoxicating fragrance, and it's really only noticeable at night. So you're going to look at these night pollinators like moths and bats going to it, and it smells kind of like a mix between or kind of like vanilla, jasmine, and citrus together, which sounds amazing. So it has that strong lunar medicine. It's night blooming wisdom, liminal space and shadow integration, trance, dreams, altered state, and beauty emerging from darkness. So Moonflower teaches us that not all medicine is solar, and that's important. Now, the crystal of the month is selenite, and selenite is a crown chakra stone with a Mohs hardness of 2. Now, a lot of people are like, don't touch selenite to water, it'll totally disappear. That's not what happens. The thing about Mohs hardness is it basically means how hard is the bond, the molecular bond. And when it's soft, that means it breaks very easily. So when you put water in it, the water molecules get between the molecular bond, right? And it splinters. So if you've ever gotten a selenite splinter, which I have, they hurt. They're just like glass splinters. So, and because selenite is fibrous, you're going to get a lot of those splinters. So it just slowly wears, like it gets between all those and just breaks it down. So eventually it does, but I wanted to see what would happen, so I put a piece of selenite in water and just sat it on my counter, and it took like 9 months for it to disappear. So it doesn't disappear overnight. So if you get it wet, a lot of people will polish selenite with water because it gets kind of shiny with water, but it's not really to be put in water, or you're just going to get that splintering happen. It's going to be very easily friable and breakable. So it is a luminous cleanser of the aura, and I mean that. If you run selenite through your auric field, it gives you chills. It's very, very powerful for energetic cleansing. It works primarily through the crown chakra, acting as a bridge between the crown, third eye, and those transpersonal chakras, but it's also good at just like balancing all of the chakras. I like to sometimes put that selenite wand right along the spine for energetic alignment and nervous system setting. I also like to do it when I'm balancing the chakras and trying to move, light up, especially if there's like a blockage in the lower chakras. Smaller wands are great for gridding the home and your property. Of course, if you leave it outside, you're not going to find it again, because eventually the nature will kind of wear away the crystal. But I bury my stones when I grid my yard, so I'm not expecting to see them again anyway. But you can hold a piece in meditation when you're doing healing work. You can place it at the crown to facilitate communication with your guides and your higher self. Polished massage wands are great for gentle massage and used to open portals, or they help close tears in the etheric field after really deep emotional or energetic work. It has a high vibration, and it's especially effective for disconnecting energetic cords, clearing stagnant attachments, and cleansing the energy field. So it's just a powerhouse. It's incredibly supportive for releasing toxic energetic entanglements and restoring clarity. Now, true blue selenite is transparent or near transparent, and if you have a piece of selenite and you're like, mine is not transparent, and I've never seen selenite that's transparent, that's because most of the selenite that's sold, and I put that in quotes, is satin spar. Okay, clear selenite is smooth rather than fibrous, and it lacks that pearly sheen sometimes associated when it gets polished. It just has that kind of pearl-like look. That's actually satin spar. So the true selenite is a little more rare, tends to be a little more expensive. So what most people will have instead are satin spar. They work in the same ways. I don't really get too picky about the name in everyday conversations, but a lot of people will argue with me, and I'm like, no, like satin spar and selenite are different, but they're basically the same chemical formula. They both belong to the gypsum family, along with desert rose and alabaster, and they function very similarly, even though their physical forms are different. There's also peach selenite, which I use quite a bit in healing, and it resonates very well in the sacral chakra. Because selenite is named after the goddess of the moon, Selene, we kind of work with it in that sacral chakra anyway for women's cycles. So the peach selenite, the peach version of it, is good for cleaning, cleansing, and clearing the sacral chakra. Really good for women and those with wombs, especially the ones that are kind of holding grief, fear, and stored trauma. That is a wonderful ally for moving out that energy. Now, I like to work with it with moonstone. Like selenite and moonstone seem to go well together for me. And I use that to support emotional flow, embodied safety, and just that creative life force energy that we work with. So the animal this month then is wolf. Wolf is a fan favorite. Honestly, who doesn't love wolf? They're loyal, playful, intelligent, fierce. When I'm working with students of shamanic healing, I hear about all kinds of guides and allies, but wolf is by far the most common animal guide people encounter. And it's no wonder, because wolves are probably the most misunderstood, feared, and persecuted animals in human history. And according to many wildlife safety sources, wolf attacks on humans are exceedingly rare. And there's this Yellowstone specific fact that may help calm the nervous system with wolves. Since wolves returned to Yellowstone in 1995, there have been no wolf attacks on humans, despite millions of visitors a year. Buffalo are far more scary than wolves, but our cultural stories kind of always portray wolf as a villain. Little Red Riding Hood, Three Little Pigs, Peter and the Wolf. In these tales, the wolf is framed as cunning, devious, and predatory. And a lot of that comes from the fact that when we have an agrarian society that keeps animals like chickens, we're going to see wolves come in and try to get those. Because anytime you have somebody's favorite food, like an animal's favorite food, kept as a livestock, you're going to have foxes and wolves come in and be like, oh, you kept that for me? Thanks. They're just standing here? Great. So many women of a certain age, of my age, wolf arrived in a very different way for us through Dr. Clarissa Pinkola Estés' book, Women Who Run with Wolves, which a circle sister of mine once called the Lady Bible, which I love. But she really says this about wolf. Wolves and women are relational by nature, inquiring, possessed of great endurance and strength. They're deeply intuitive, intensely concerned with their young, their mate, and their pack. Yet both have been hounded and harassed and falsely imputed to be devouring and devious and overly aggressive and of less value than those who are their detractors. But, in my opinion, wolf medicine really does transcend gender. It speaks to protection and ritual and loyalty, spirit, and the interplay between community and solitude. The pack of wolves versus the lone wolf. So it kind of teaches us about the sacred tension between those two places, about belonging without losing oneself, about wildness that doesn't need taming, and tenderness that does not weaken strength. As Dr. Estés points out, wolf really holds instinct and devotion with, that ferocity and care. So we kind of think of wolf as epitomizing freedom. Some people use wolf in the South. They're wild spirit of nature and of animals themselves. So wolf, sorry, I put a cough drop in because I was losing my voice. So this is a long one. Sorry, guys. But wolf reminds us that we are meant to know who we are and to also know who we belong with. So wolf medicine comes in when we're being asked to examine our relationship to community. And I think this is a really important time on a geopolitical stage to really think about, where do I feel at home? Where do I feel exiled? Who are my people? Where am I meant to lead? Where am I meant to listen? Where am I the alpha? Where am I not the alpha? Wolf really shows us how to move through the world with an awareness of others without abandoning who we are. Now, wolf medicine, is one that kind of came through, as the wild spirit of nature. And we see a lot of people honoring that. Even if they know nothing about shamanic work, they just love the wolf. So wolf evolved on this planet for roughly 35 million years. They're the largest member of the canid family and are the species from which our domesticated dogs descended. There are two primary species, the gray wolf and the red wolf, and close to 40 recognized subspecies, including Arctic wolves and timber wolves and Mexican wolves. And wolves are found across North America, Europe, Africa, and Asia. So throughout the world, wolf has appeared as a guide and companion for the gods and the goddesses. And I love that about wolf's medicine. The Celts regarded wolf as a guardian spirit. In Scotland, the Gaelic creator goddess Cailleach was said to ride a wolf. The ancient Welsh moon goddess Ceridwen was accompanied by a wolf whose power was sourced from lunar wisdom. The Celtic hero Cormac mac Airt, the High King of Ireland, was said to have been raised by wolves and to have spoken their language, and was accompanied by 4 wolves wherever he traveled. In 5th century England, Merlin, the magician of Arthurian lore, had wolf as his only companion while living in the forest. In Greek mythology, Apollo, the god of the sun and wind, carried the epithet Lycaenages, meaning born of wolf. In many native and indigenous cultures, wolf is considered a powerful medicine being associated with courage, strength, loyalty, and success at hunting. Like bear, wolf is considered closely related to humans. So origin stories among the northwest coast, such as the Quileute and the Quaquitl, tell of first ancestors being transformed from wolves into people. In Shoshone mythology, wolf appears as a noble creator god. In the Anishinaabe stories, wolf is the brother and close companion of a culture hero. So among the Pueblo tribes, wolf is one of the 6 directional guards associated with the east and the color white. And Zuni people carve stone wolf fetishes for protection, describing them with healing power or hunting power or both. Wolves are one of the most common clan animals in Native American cultures. Wolf clans appear among the Creek, Cherokee, Chippewa, Lenape, Shawnee, Menominee, Huron, Iroquois, Caddo, Osage, Chickasaw, Pueblo peoples of New Mexico, and northwest coast tribes such as the Tlingit, the Tsimshian, and the Quaquitl. Hopefully I pronounced those right. I do look up everything to pronounce it, and then when I get to it, I just and I freak out. So on the northwest coast, wolf is a frequent clan crest and is found carved into totem poles. But despite the misunderstanding and mythic distortion, wolves are highly social, intelligent, and family-oriented animals, and they live in packs, raise young communally, and maintain complex communication systems. So, wolf medicine teaches us about belonging and knowing who your people are, about protecting what matters, remembering that you're both an individual soul and part of a greater whole. So this is really important medicine with this astrology that we have. So wolf comes in when we're asked to find our place in the world and in our community, to remember the pack, to remember ourselves. So with Aquarius activating our relationship to community and Aries igniting courage, wolf really arrives as a teacher of conscious belonging. And this is a month to examine where you feel called to show up, who you feel called to walk with, how you can move forward in integrity with your own wild truth intact. So February feels like it's the threshold month and a place where dreaming starts asking for legs, where imagination begins asking for courage, and where the future quietly whispers, come on, participate with me. So with Neptune and Saturn activating Aries, eclipse season opening the door, and the year of the fire horse stirring embers in our belly, we are being invited to a relationship with becoming more ourselves. The moon kind of reminds us that self-awareness is the foundation of all true transformation. And Moonflower obviously teaches us that some medicine only blooms in the dark. And Selenite says, well, I can clear away the static so you can hear yourself again. And Wolf says, then you can walk forward with sovereignty and belonging. And none of this is asking for perfection. It's just asking for presence, to listen, to feel, to choose, and to take the next honest step. So February is not here to rush you. It's here to remind you that your becoming is already in motion and that you're allowed to move with it. So thanks for listening to this very long February reading, and I hope you have a good month.
Thanks for listening to Centered with me, Angie Yingst. If you'd like to send me a question or comment about this show or any shows, you can send them to Angie@themoonandstone.com.